Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a topic that literally touches every single human being, yet somehow it's still shrouded in so much myth and, frankly, unnecessary fear. The final 60 minutes of life. Okay, let's get right into it. Our goal today is to completely demystify this final hour. We're going to replace all those dramatic, terrifying cinematic myths we've all grown up with and look at the astonishing and actually quite peaceful biological science of what truly happens at the end. You know the Hollywood version, right? It's usually a brightly lit hospital room, everyone is crying around the bed, and the patient delivers these perfectly timed, incredibly articulate last words just before the monitor flatlines. But the biological reality, it is profoundly different. It's quiet, it's slow, the person is typically deeply, deeply unconscious, and the body undergoes a very gradual, systematic shutdown. Think of it like a physics equation. The body is simply, and very smartly, redirecting its remaining limited energy away from non-essential systems just to protect its core. Section 1. The body's peaceful shutdown. So, as blood pressure naturally falls, the body does this thing called levodo reticularis. Because it's prioritizing the vital organs, circulation naturally retreats from the extremities. If you're there, you might notice hands and feet becoming cool to the touch, maybe taking on a purplish or waxy appearance. And you'll also see the facial muscles relax in a way they rarely do, honestly, even in deep sleep. The jaw might slacken, the eyes might be unfocused. It is a state of profound biological relaxation. As we keep looking at the physical changes, we encounter a very specific shift in breathing, known as Cheyne-Stokes respiration. This is a cycle where breaths build up, get a bit faster, then kind of taper off into shallow breaths and eventually pause entirely, sometimes for up to a minute. Then they start up again. Now, the absolutely crucial point here is that this is not uncomfortable for the patient. Their oxygen sensing mechanisms are already going offline. This pattern is really just the brainstem, the most ancient part of our brain sputtering a bit, kind of like a car engine running on fumes. And that brings us to what might be the single biggest misconception we need to clear up today, the so-called death rattle. As swallowing reflexes naturally weaken, normal fluids just pool in the back of the throat, which creates a gurgling sound with each breath. To a family member sitting there, it sounds highly distressing, but the biological reality for the patient, it is completely medically benign. The deeply unconscious patient is in zero pain and experiences absolutely no distress. Section 2. The brain's last fireworks. For decades, we kind of just assumed the brain slowly went dark, faded to black, right? Well, actually, scratch that. As one researcher noted, the dying brain wasn't powering down. It was briefly and paradoxically going into overdrive. Back in 2013, there was a stunning study on dying rats, which was followed up by some incredible human EEG findings in 2023. They showed the exact opposite of a quiet shutdown. In the seconds after cardiac arrest, the brain literally exploded with high-frequency gamma oscillations. These are the brainwaves associated with heightened consciousness, intense focus, and vivid memory retrieval. And they surged to levels even higher than normal wakefulness. Absolutely wild. And during this incredible surge, the active zones in the brain are highly specific. We're talking about visual processing areas, spatial awareness centers, sensory integration regions, and memory formation centers. So these aren't just random, chaotic spasms of a dying organ. These are highly organized, coherent oscillations in very conscious brain regions. Researchers carefully hypothesized that this intense biological activity could be the exact mechanism explaining those vivid life reviews and the extraordinary clarity reported by people who've had near-death experiences. Section 3. The neurochemical flood. Right as the body reaches its final limits, it releases an absolute cascade of neurochemicals. First up, endorphins, our body's natural opioids. They flood the system, completely blunting any pain and creating that profound calm hospice workers always see on patients' faces. Then, serotonin spikes, which actually alters time perception and can induce vivid hallucinatory states. There's also this widely hypothesized release of DMT from the pineal gland, which totally aligns with reports of seeing tunnels of light or having out-of-body transcendence. Finally, a massive hit of adrenaline and noradrenaline triggers a maximum survival effort, heightening awareness. The result of all this? It's a chemical cocktail specifically designed to induce awe and peace, not fear. So the biological effects of that crazy gamma surge and this neurochemical cascade directly support the phenomenon of near-death experiences. And listen, these aren't some fringe phenomenon. They are consistently reported by roughly 6 to 12% of all cardiac arrest survivors. That's a huge number. And what really makes researchers take this seriously is that these accounts are remarkably consistent across completely different cultures, ages, and religious backgrounds. Survivors uniformly describe these experiences not as terrifying, but as incredibly beautiful, transformative, and profoundly positive. Section 4, the enduring senses, why hearing fades last. Now, our senses don't just switch off all at once like a light bulb. It's a very structured sequence. Early on, vision dims and loses focus. Then taste and smell, which are already pretty weakened, fade away entirely. Crucially, though, touch persists much longer than most people expect. So, holding a loved one's hand, that is highly likely still being registered deep into unconsciousness. But finally, hearing. Hearing is the absolute last sense to go. And this isn't just a comforting thought. It is hard, proven science. There was this brilliant EEG study out of the University of British Columbia that tested exactly this. They measured the brain responses of patients in their final hours who were completely clinically unresponsive. And the staggering result? The EEG showed measurable, undeniable responses to auditory stimuli. The dying brain's auditory system was still functioning, still processing sound, even when the patient couldn't physically signal any awareness at all. So what does this all mean for us? The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that the words you say in that room, they really might be reaching them. This is probably the most profound practical thing to remember from this entire explainer. When you are with someone in their final hours, keep talking to them. Keep saying whatever needs to be said. Keep playing their favorite music, because the science confirms that the biological machinery to receive your voice is still holding on. Section 5. Crossing the final threshold. As we get to the final minutes, breathing becomes agonal, which means just barely present sighs, and the heart gives its last effective contractions. This is what we call clinical death, where the heartbeat and breathing definitively cease. But here's the thing, that is not an instantaneous switch to biological death. Cellular and electrical activity actually takes minutes to fully end. Some neurons are still firing, some cells are still processing. Shutting down is a process. Death isn't a hard black and white line, it's a slow, fading gradient. Let's bring this all together and summarize what we've learned today about the biological reality of our final hour. Assuming there's good palliative care in place, the final hour is rarely characterized by severe pain. That final period of deep unconsciousness is free of fear or agitation. The body exhibits a profound, totally observable physiological peace and muscle relaxation. And, incredibly, the sensory system literally holds onto the voices of loved ones right until the very end. The biological journey to that final threshold is just far less bleak and, honestly, far richer than we ever imagined. Which leaves us with one massive, profoundly open question. We know about the gamma waves. We know about the endorphins. We know about the enduring hearing. But what happens after that gradient fully fades? Does consciousness somehow persist beyond that very last electrical signal? Or does the accumulated weight of an entire life, every single memory, every joy, every ordinary afternoon, just simply stop? Science is still working on that. And honestly, it remains the oldest, most fascinating open question we have. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this gave you a new, comforting perspective on the reality of our final hour.